Far too often, if not thought out and carried out systematically, many key performance indicators are internal and do not reflect the outcomes to the customers or the users who eventually are paying for the services and employ the whole service provider organization. Classic errors are measuring internal things and not customer-facing outcomes. That's a very common one. I was already earlier referring to the watermelon effect, where things look green in the reports, but they are actually red in the inside. And I don't mean that the watermelon is as at best in this way, but in a way that we select the measurements that we can keep and show and look good, even though the customers are still unhappy and the value is not realized. They can end up in the agreements even. We take simple things, and it goes vice versa, that whatever gets measured gets focused on. So we try to meet the numbers instead of the real thing in the background. And I would put this idea in the both sides of the organization, the service customer and the service provider. So if the service customer is interested only about the numbers, he will definitely get only the numbers. But it's uh, it's a good thing to try to think what is the right kind of numbers, and especially focus on the stuff that gets the right things right. I mean, are customers satisfied, or does some actual real life thing materialize? Those are good outcome-based metrics, and metrics and measurement should be also about them. We need all kind of metrics uh, for previous one to say that we have accomplished, but in order to make things better, we also need internal and more detailed ones. Some of you might recall from Peter Drucker's quote that you need to define things so you can measure them, and you can need to measure them so you can manage them. Well, you can manage things even though you don't measure them. I mean, I have kids and I manage their life even though I don't have any tables and measurements in place. But in the abstract and complex world that we live in with the IT services, it is practical that we should measure things. Not everything, because it's impossible, but some things that are relevant in order to ensure relevant things and especially have an impact for whether we are meeting our goals and others are meeting their goals, and how do we work so we can improve. That's also a very important reason for measurements. I heard quote from the DevOps library that you should measure everything, and that I don't know whether the exact wording was that one, but I noticed that it's impossible to measure everything. Also considering what is your process and related tools defines you what kind of measurements can you get easily. I would underline that one, that if you try to do something, focus on the measurement too, because especially if you get the measurements easily out of the box without any extra effort or development, you will need that kind of data to validate lots of different kind of things, especially for the input for your improvements. Can you identify the improvement ideas? For that one, the facts are good, or finding the root causes. For that one, the measurements are also good. With these introductions, few words about measurements. Why do we measure? The objectives are about understanding our performance, how well we are doing, are we doing well enough, and bringing that down into the pieces that what do we actually do to currently, so we can find the improvement ideas within our own work. So that's another very good approach for measuring and reason for measuring. And third one is that aligning customer needs and our business goals with ours. So measuring those ones, customer satisfaction, customer experience, do the ships leave the harbor in time, that kind of stuff helps us to see that even though we are not all the thing that customer needs to do their job, but vice versa, if the customer can do their job, then we have also succeeded in our part of that one. So therefore, one should have relevant measurements in different levels. There are use cases and times when somebody shouts that everything is wrong and nothing works. And they might be very powerful for influential people that are taken seriously by their position or character. And I do like that the personal observations and insights are important, but they need facts beside them to know whether this is a phenomenon, is it really true, and so on. For that one, it's great that you have some data and the related measurements so that you can actually justify with facts and the stuff that you get observed or reported to. So you need both personal insights as well as the data, and for that one, the measurement is important. So within the data that you have come through to you by measurements, you can identify areas for improvement. Where do we have waiting times? On what services are especially the ones that are experiencing some difficulties? What teams or individuals are the ones who are waiting? There's usually a rational reason for these ones, but we need to identify the areas that need improvement so we can ask the right people the right questions. And how is the service used? Are there some features that are unused but still cost maintenance for us? So that's the rationale why to measure different kind of things and find the improvements, which are used sometimes reallocation of resources, improving something, or even removing something unnecessary. There are three levels of measurement that I usually take as a guideline. There are outcome-based metrics. I mean, does the customer get what he wants? Is he satisfied? Then there are process metrics. How well do we keep our promises concerning our work, meaning solving incidents, granting access rights, and that kind of stuff. And third one is the technical measurements. That does the service itself technically work? What is the downtime? How long was the downtime? And how much resources are we using for it? So these outcome-based metrics, process metrics, and technical metrics are at least one way to understand that what kind of different kind of measurement do we need for different reasons. And matching those ones together gives some kind of guidance too, that is the customer satisfied even though we deliver our processes by the resolution times, or if we find mismatches. So the different kind of measurements will show us also that are we doing good enough or do we need improvement. Notice also that even though the obvious things is to measure the stuff that customer sees, I mean direct resources and that kind of stuff. So also the related stuff, the non-customer facing services like Active Directory or network and that kind of stuff, they need monitoring and measurements from technical perspective, but also from information security perspective. If they fail down, then sooner or later it will show to customers. And again, measuring those ones technically will actually make us more proactive because we can find with the measurements that things are going to break down. Or even though we would be reactive, we know where the root cause is. So therefore, measuring those ones too is important. There are many insights about what data to measure and why. Usually the guidance starts with why, would be about in this context that why, what do we need to know and why? And that would actually then give us the kind of understanding that what kind of data do we need, even though the details would be left afterwards. Well, that's a good advice, even though it's not an ITSM expert's advice. But if you have an idea that what requires measurement and why, then think about the data and come to this diagram. So what you can ask it, what data do you need? Or then I think the most relevant question is that what data do we have that actually then already that can tell us the following thing. Because setting up different kind of tools or even changing the processes to collect the data is always takes more effort than using what you already have. But anyway, when you know something that is relevant and requires measurements, then you need to think about the data. And correct thing over here is that to think about that how will the data be used. So think about the use cases at latest after you know what data you have in use. That's a good one because the rest of the things will actually then take quite a lot of effort. So ensure that you do the right things and not unnecessary things. Now, when you know what kind of data do you need for what purpose, you can evaluate what kind of processes you need to have to produce the data and what kind of tools to be used in the process to create the data. Depending on whether it's technical information, then it's monitoring tools. But if it's about customer satisfaction and outcome-based thing, how do customers feel about the service, then it must be about some kind of survey tools. And the last fourth point in this page is that to make a sanity check that does this make sense. I mean, if you calculate the need and the required tools, do you still have a business case to move forward? Does it provide value or does it eat the value? Because changing the processes and introducing the tools will take more effort that you are actually trying to manage. You don't measure things for sake of measurement. They measure things for the sake of actions that you take and the value that you are trying to achieve with it. But there are different kind of needs. There are management needs, there are technical people needs, and service owner needs, and so on. So walk through all the use cases and before you make a commitment to any technology or especially start the action. Within measurements, you always have the original source systems, and then because they are fragmented, you usually try to bring the data somewhere where you actually then use it. So Next thing to ensure is that not just that the data is generated in the source and you have tools that should aggregate it, but ensure that the data ends up in the aggregated and integrated places in the correct way, and the data is correct also after transferring it. I mean, there might be gaps or data mappings or related changes that occur and then kill the plans about data mappings. So ensure that the data you actually are trying to interpret is correct and consistent, and not, for example, the integration is losing some data or have stopped sending the data. So once you have the data, do the analysis to gain the insights, dive into it, look for patterns and areas of concern. Most of the things you already are quite obvious. People in the smaller context are aware of those ones, but gathering the data and giving it to separate analysis, especially to AI, which is very good in finding things without understanding, then you have a lot of insights to go through, and that actually will speed up this part of the process. But once you have the data and you find the relevant one, try to visualize it. People understand visualizations for changes a lot better than just pure plain numbers. You need to know the content quite well to actually manage with the numbers, which are more exact, but they require understanding. And once you have those data and the related visualizations, please making sure that they are distributed in the right audience in the right way, meaning that management cannot look the details, so they need a summary, and some technical persons need the full raw data almost to be able to do their job. So work through the use cases at latest in this stage, even though you most likely it's beneficial to go through them in the very beginning, especially after you have some hunch what kind of data you might have in use. There are many things concerned to make the data available and enabling in monitoring and reporting all the way first time. But if you look at it a little bit from current state and time to behind, you or think about it in the longer perspective, it's not just about creating measurement, it's about changing those ones and ensuring that we have only relevant ones left. I recall a quote from an organization who had, it was in insurance business, and they had this kind of data platform already 15 years ago. And it was coming to the end of life, and they were having 1,500 different kind of reports generated. And they were wondering that how much of these are actually needed, because they were setting up a new system and they knew that creating all the reports and ensuring the data and doing the migration takes a huge amount of effort. So what they did, they were actually emailing and trying to contact all the owners of the existing 1,500 report owners. And surprisingly, they were finding that the people were no longer employed or the reports were no longer needed. So they, at that stage, they got 200 reports reported that they were needed, and they migrated the 200 reports out of the 1,500. So after the old ones did not deliver anymore, there were about 100 more about that. Where is this report? I'm used to look at it. So they did some 100 more, but that was showing that 80% of the reports were actually not used by anybody. And you didn't hear this one from me, but it's also my guidance that you may try the need for the report by not sending it in some day, because quite often it happens that nobody will ask for the report. And also in that question was that quite many use cases that people had inherited reports from some earlier manager that had left, and they had never looked into those. So, and they were not even aware that they had their name on the report. So therefore, analyze this one, that which ones are used. And one very good question is that you may ask that who has initiated an improvement effort in the last 6 months based on this report. And if the answer is that nobody has initiated any improvement initiatives, then it might be so that the issue that the report is about is good enough or not relevant anymore. So try to get rid of the unnecessary reports, because managing the data when the data changes takes huge amount of effort. So there must always be a valid use case for every report.